In today's analysis, we're going to go over BIDU, the Google of China. But before we get into the details, if you could smash the like button, it really helps the YouTube algorithm. For many of you, you may have never heard of BIDU, and that may be because they operate in China. Operating in China has some pros, but there's definitely cons in the fact that the United States and China have some tensions, and there's always a chance of a delisting. BIDU at its core is a search engine that makes money through advertising. It has many other businesses, which we'll get into later, but if you see its homepage here, you could tell it's very much like Google. When digging into the market share that BIDU holds in search in China, I found that in 2019, BIDU held 71.5% of all market share for search in China. Even more impressively, I discovered that BIDU held 93.83% of the mobile search market share in China in May of 2021, with the second largest search engine only holding 2.55% of the Chinese mobile market share. When comparing this to Google, Google holds 88.84% market share of search in the United States as of 2021. Now, looking at the total addressable market, it's clear that China has a much larger population than the United States. So China has 1.4 billion people, whereas the United States currently has about 328 million people. And as I mentioned earlier, BIDU has a lot bigger ambitions than just search. So a couple of those businesses are BIDU Wiki, which is like Wikipedia. They have a lot of things in AI solutions, cloud services, robotics, healthcare, and more. The first business I'm going to highlight is BIDU Maps. BIDU Maps is like Google Maps, and it's so popular in China that even Tesla uses BIDU Maps as the default mapping system in all Teslas that operate in China. Next, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, but BIDU owns a company called Haokan, which is basically YouTube. So Google owns YouTube, and BIDU owns their version of a YouTube, which is user-uploaded videos. If you aren't getting it yet, BIDU and Google are very similar. They're going after similar industries, and BIDU decides to take it a step further with trying to come out with its own TikTok product. And I'll probably pronounce this wrong, but it's called something like Quanmin. Now, the next project is extremely ambitious, and it's called Apollo. This is BIDU's self-driving project. In December of 2020, BIDU announced a joint partnership to create electric vehicles. In the past couple weeks, they've also been pushing for driverless taxis on China's roads. They've pledged to build 1,000 driverless taxis in 3 years' time. Inside these self-driving cars is going to be an operating system called DuerOS. So this is a platform that BIDU created for its artificial intelligence system. DuerOS allows devices to use BIDU's voice assistant so users can communicate with hardware by speaking to it. For example, BIDU has a range of its own smart devices under a brand called BIDU. BIDU includes speakers, wireless earphones, and other products with the voice assistant. And DuerOS is an open platform, so other hardware makers can install it on their devices. China wants to be the default operating system for voice assistant. Think Alexa. Now we're going to look at IQE. IQE is actually its own stock, trading under the ticker IQ. But BIDU owns a majority stake in the company with 56% ownership. IQ is basically the Netflix of China. It's much smaller and it has a market cap of $12.4 billion, so BIDU's stake is worth about $7 billion. So you get the idea. BIDU isn't just a search engine, in the same way that Google isn't just a search engine. But it's going to take a long time for BIDU to become Google, and it may never get there. BIDU currently trades at a market cap of $73 billion. So let's get into the numbers, but be prepared, it's about to get intense. In the last 4 quarters combined of revenue, we break down the increase year over year of revenue from 2012 through today. On the right, you can see that we had 48% year over year growth 2012 to 13. In 13 to 14, 48%. In 14 to 15, 47.4%. 15 to 16, 33%. 16 to 17, 3%. 17 to 18, 24%. 2018 to 2019, 19%. 2019 to 2020, 0.3%. and then 2020 to 2021, 6.5%. So we went from $2.5 billion in revenue in 2012 to $17.4 billion in revenue today. Now, how is revenue going to go going forward? And with ambitious projects like BIDU has, it's very hard to project where the revenue growth will come from and how much it will be. So you need to make your own assumptions. For me, I like to stay conservative, so I'm going to go with 10 to 15% year-over-year revenue growth over the next decade. And I think that because that's a lower revenue growth than they had in the past, but they're working on projects that very well could have much higher revenue growth. So here is where I break down the revenue projections. 10% year-over-year growth and 15% year-over-year growth listed through 2020 all the way down to 2030. You can pause the screen here if you want to take notes and look, and if not, I'll just give you the bottom line. I project 2030 revenue to be somewhere between $42.8 billion to $66.75 billion. Now today, BIDU trades at a price-to-sales ratio of 4.09. So the first of many ways we're going to value BIDU is going to be a price-to-sales ratio. Keep in mind, Google trades for a price-to-sales ratio of 9.42, and from 2017 until now, Google's lowest price-to-sales was only 4.8. So BIDU could very well trade for a much higher price-to-sales ratio than 4 in the future, just as Google does today. We're going to come up with valuations for BIDU through multiple different avenues, but the first way I want to look at it is from a price-to-sales ratio. So in 2030, if we assume the 10% year-over-year revenue growth, and you take a price-to-sales ratio of the S&P 500, which is 3.09, less than BIDU's current price-to-sales, it would be worth $132.25 billion. If you kept the same price-to-sales ratio of 4.09, it would be worth $175 billion. And if it traded for some reason at Google's price-to-sales ratio of 9.42 in the future, it would be worth $403 billion. Now, if you assume the 15% year-over-year revenue growth through 2030, you get valuations between $206 billion to $628 billion, depending on the price-to-sales ratio you use, whether it's the S&P 500, its current price-to-sales, or Google's price-to-sales. The bottom line is you have a market cap of $73 billion, and based on a price-to-sales ratio in 2030, it gets somewhere between a 1.8x to an 8.6 times, so a huge range of $132 billion to $628 billion. This illustrates why investing is more of an art, and when projecting 10 years out, it's always better to be conservative because the range between something like 10% to 15% will have huge implications over a long period of time. So BIDU has about 50% gross profit margin, and I want to take a look at the net income as a percentage of revenue. So I broke this down from 2011 through 2020, and I actually show you each year net income as a percentage of revenue to see if there's any consistencies here. Now, over the last decade, there's an average of 29.19% net income profit margins. And if you get rid of the 1 year where they had a 1.9%, it's 32.22%. I'm going to make the assumption that it's basically been 30% a year for 10 years going. So when projecting the next decade, I'm going to go with the 30% net income margins, and we did revenue of $42.8 billion to $66.75 billion, which we showed how we got to earlier. So that creates a net income of $12.8 to $20 billion in net income in 2030. Now we have that net income number, and we want to create a valuation based off of it. So we're going to do a price to earnings on the net income, and I'm coming up with a price to earnings of 20. I believe that's a fair number. So 20 PE on $12.8 to $20 billion. That creates a market cap range of $256 billion to $400 billion. They have a current market cap of $73 billion, so we're looking about at a 3.5 to 5.5x on your money over the next decade if this assumption comes true. The next thing we look at is free cash flow. So I'm going to look at free cash flow as a percentage of revenue over the past decade as well. And basically the bottom line is it's about 23.63%, but I give you, if you want to pause the screen and look, I give you the breakdown year by year. So if we want to create a valuation based on a price to earnings on free cash flow, we look at the revenue we expected, $42.8 billion to $66.75 billion. We take 23.63% of that number as free cash flow, and that gives us $10 to $15.7 billion in free cash flow in 2030. So I throw a PE of 20 on that free cash flow, and when you do that, you come out with a market cap between $202 to $315 billion market cap. That is 2.8 times to 4.3 times the current market cap over a decade's time, assuming again that those assumptions come true. So now we're going to take an overview and see the different valuation methods we used and sum them all up. So at first we used net income, 256 to 400 billion valuation. Then we used free cash flow, 202 to 315 billion. And we did a price to sales as well, which was 132 to 628 billion. The current market cap is 73 billion. If you average all the valuations together, you get an average of $322 billion. That's a 4.4 times return on your money over a decade's time, assuming the assumptions we made. Now, if I'm correct, and we do see a 4.4x in the next decade, that would bring the share price to $910 a share in 2030, assuming the company doesn't do any splits. So as you can imagine, if I'm this bullish, I would have purchased stock. And that's exactly what I did. I purchased $100,000 of BIDU stock in the last 48 hours. Now, in the interest of being transparent, I'm showing you my purchase price and the dates I bought it, which you can see in the photo above. I bought it on 6/28/2021 and 6/29/2021 with an average price of $206 a share. Now keep in mind a few things. First, I plan to hold this stock for a very long time. Second, this is one of many investments I have, and I wouldn't recommend anybody put a large portion of their account in any single stock. Third, all stocks have risk, and before investing, do your own due diligence. I'm not a financial advisor. 4, I'll be watching earnings reports every quarter and keeping up with the news. If anything changes in my long-term thesis, I'm probably going to sell. And 5, never invest what you're not willing to lose. Investing is an art and nothing is for sure. Some of you might be wondering what the next 12 months look like for BIDU. For me, I like to invest with long time horizons, 5 to 10 years out usually. But if you look at top analysts' ratings on tip ranks, there are 11 ratings and 10 of them are a buy, 1 hold, and 0 sells from the top analysts, with an average price target of $319.50 within 12 months' time. And the lowest rating was $217, which is above today's price, and $372 as a high price target. Another thing I found interesting is that ARK Invest actually holds BIDU as the 5th largest position in their ARKQ ETF, which is an ETF on autonomous technologies and robotics. Now, if you made it this far, please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps the YouTube algorithm, and I could really use the support on this new channel. Thank you so much for watching.